Welcome everyone to the second video on the Kiyan Sobani YouTube channel. This is obviously Kiyan Sobani, and as you can see, I have a huge microphone that I'm holding. This is my podcast microphone. When I get good at this YouTube thing and I actually am able to invest in a small microphone I can clip on my shirt, that will probably make me look a bit more professional. But in the meantime, this is what we do because at this point, this is the best audio quality I can give you, so we're going to go with this method. Today's video, I'm going to be revealing what I'm going to be working on in my book about Real Madrid, going to offer some journalism advice, and also just wanted to say right off the bat, one of the comments on my first YouTube video, was a question asking if I can take you guys behind the scenes in some of the Bernabeu, Valdebebas stuff in my future YouTube videos. And the answer is yes, that's absolutely the plan. Now, I don't think I'll be revealing anything groundbreaking, but you will be able to see kind of through my lens what I do when I go to the Bernabeu. Where's the press area? Where does the press sit? What's the view of the Bernabeu? Where do we go for the press conference? Kind of some behind the scenes of the mix zone, Valdebebas, the training sessions, the rondos, some of the press conferences, the Castilla games. I'm going to be giving you guys as much of a glimpse as I can. Now, that won't be the primarily purpose of this video, but you may see those sprinkled in the background as I'm talking, just so you can kind of see what I'm doing and where I'll be. What I really wanted to do in this video primarily is to talk about my book. I haven't, in all these about 2 years now that I've been talking about this book I'm writing, I haven't really told you what I'm writing about exactly. Just to get you hyped about it a little bit, I want to reveal that today for the first time. So the book itself, I knew that I was going to write a book for a long time now. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I've been speaking to authors, kind of in the process, picking their brains about the process. And, a few ideas bounced around my head. I wanted to write about Di Stefano, I wanted to write about Puskás, I wanted to write about Florentino Perez and Santiago Bernabéu. The problem was the amount of things you can write about this club in particular are so vast and detailed that it was hard to find that particular niche. And I promise you, I'm going to get into detail, maybe reveal multiple books within a series to cover that entire scope and kind of create this almost Real Madrid encyclopedia, but that's very detailed. So instead of a Wikipedia page about a certain player or president, you'll get a whole book about them. But the primary niche about this book, what it's going to be, is kind of a crash course about its history, but very detailed. So when I say crash course, it almost does it injustice because this book is going to be anywhere between 700 to 1,000 pages once the final edit is just cut through and fleshed out. And what I'm going to do is basically take you back into the club's history from 1902 and to such great detail that I'm actually going back and watching games from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and so forth, decade by decade, going through the biggest games and actually writing tactical analysis on them. So when I write about, for example, the Di Stefano and Puskás era and all the surrounding pieces and Gento and Santa Maria and all these greats, I'm going to actually tell you what they were like tactically. It's a lot of work, and I hope you can appreciate it. I'm putting my entire soul into this, but it's what's required if you want to get a detailed analysis of how these players have done in the club's history and where they rank and what their legacy is. Because let's be honest, if you go on the internet, you can find information about the life of Di Stefano and Puskás, and throughout the years, Butragueño and Chendo, and Sanchez and Hierro and Redondo. I mean, there's a million legends in this club, and to talk about them all is very difficult. But I'm actually going to give you an analysis that you can't get on the internet. I'm going to get exclusive interviews, and some of which I've already done and finished recording, some of which are upcoming, some of which I'm hopeful to get. So it's going to be very detailed, and it's not going to be things you can just kind of find on Wikipedia. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be ranking the club's players based on their legacy and where they kind of rank in terms of like who's in the pantheon, who's in the throne, who's in maybe the ground floor of the pyramid, who are the unsung heroes, and kind of rank them and group them together based on the tiers of where they are. And I can't really do this unless I'm watching games. I'm watching film, I'm looking at the stats. A lot of the stats obviously they just weren't there for us to see. I mean, even if you go back on sites like Who Scored or ESPN, for example, they only go so far back. ESPN goes back to the early millennium, but they don't have detailed stats beyond goals and assists. And Who Scored really goes back only about, I think, 8 to 10 years or so. So in terms of understanding, like, you know, how many key passes per game, let's say, Gento had, it's impossible to tell. So I can't do it unless I'm actually watching the film. And that's what's going to set this book apart. I'm actually doing tactical analysis of those old games. And what I'm going to be doing is kind of bringing you up to speed about the club's history. And the reason I chose this niche, and I'll tell you exactly how I came to this idea, the night we recorded a podcast with Omar Vin on the Managing Madrid podcast, we did an episode about Real Madrid's all-time 11 and who makes the bench. That episode went well over an hour. And what we realized after that is that basically there is a story for each one of those players on the bench, each one of those players on the field that made the cut. And beyond them, there are just entire storylines, the team they played in, the era they played in, the coaches that managed them. There is an endless amount of things to write about in this club. And what we realize, and I know this because, you know, just by default, by running the largest Real Madrid podcast in the world, a lot of fans have joined us with Cristiano Ronaldo in 2009, and that's totally okay. We all become fans at some point. One of the recurring questions is, can you please tell us more about X player? And a lot of these players they want to know about are not really that old. They can be as recent as Guti, Beckham, Van Nistelrooy, or they can be a bit older, like players like Redondo, for example. But there are so many people who are dying to know more about the club and kind of the older history that precedes Ronaldo, that this is what spurred me this idea to write about this niche for this particular book. Now, this book is for everybody. It's going to be for people who are new to the club. It's going to be for socios who have been socios for maybe 30, 40 years. It's going to be for people who are not necessarily fans of Real Madrid but want to know more about it. It's for everybody. I promise it's going to be great. And it's going to be told through my lens, with anecdotes, with stories, with exclusive interviews. And it's a huge project, and I'm really excited for you to read it. I did want to mention, though, and this is more related to the journalism side of things, in New York, when we did our live podcast, a lot of people asked me, what's the status of the book? And my kind of, response throughout the last year or so on social media has been, it's about a year away. I have no idea exactly what the timeline is. We have publishers and a book agent that keeps us, or keeps me at least, with deadlines and kind of these strict things to follow. But the thing about the creative process is, and I want to mention this to aspiring journalists, aspiring writers, aspiring authors, the creative process is more than just sitting down at your laptop, scheduling a chunk of time to write, and just going to work. If I'm scheduling, let's say, an hour block tomorrow to work on my book, I can sit at my laptop in that 1 hour and just stare at the screen, be unmotivated, and not be inspired. So I will have to actually step away, maybe go play some basketball, play some soccer, who knows, do some art, go for a hike, go out to eat, spend time with my loved ones, and then come back to it mentally recharged to write. So for that reason, the deadlines, while they push me, I also don't want to rush the process. I want to put out a really good and detailed product. So for that reason, I don't have an official timeline yet. Now I will at some point, I think. And when I do, I will let you know. You will be able to pre-order the book and whatnot. But for now, I don't really have a timeline on it yet. And I did want to, on that note, just give out a piece of advice for aspiring journalists. The most common question I get in my email inbox from aspiring journalists is this very vague, open-ended question, which is, how can I make it as a journalist? What do I have to do? What's your piece of advice? And it's almost impossible to answer that question. I mean, that's part of the reason why I set up my mentorship program. It's for this reason, and that is to kind of interview you. Let me see where your head's at. What are your goals? And kind of go through the process with you and provide the nuance that's required to answer this question. But if I had to give one bullet point, I guess, to take with you in this very vague question and kind of how to answer it, it's this. Be relentless in your pursuit and don't lose focus and don't lose your motivation and discipline to execute this plan that you have, which is to become a journalist. It's beyond that 9-to-5 job. When you come home, you're tired, you want to work on your journalism career, you put aside, 10 minutes. You put aside 1 hour, 2 hours, I don't know, whatever it takes. And that can be very difficult because when you come home from a stressful day at work, you're tired, you're mentally not entirely clear. You want to go and, for the sake of your own mental health, go out with your loved ones, go out to eat, turn your brain off, maybe watch a movie. So it can be very hard to do, and I know because I've been there. But you'll be thankful to yourself if you just get through it and work and hustle and hustle. And in most cases, I wouldn't necessarily take that blind advice and say hustling will make you more successful or whatnot. It really depends on your goals. Some of the hardest working people on the planet are not really at a stage in their lives where they're more successful than people who don't work as hard but just kind of work smarter. What you need to do as a journalist, kind of find the balance of both. So for example, what I do when I wake up, my routine is I check every bit of football news I possibly can. I listen to all the relevant podcasts just to get my news and information. Now, my analysis, I do my own because I trust my analysis most. But you want to be able to educate yourself as much as you can about the game and kind of immerse yourself so that you don't fall out of it. And the reason for this is because you want to develop habits too. So it's not about just consuming information for the sake of it. I also suggest writing every day, and not for the sake of it, but because there's a purpose behind it. When you write every day, even if it doesn't go published, which by the way, I have a lot of work that doesn't go unpublished because I feel like it's not good enough to publish. But by the end of it, what I do is I read it and it doesn't go to waste because while I'm writing that column or that article that nobody sees, I'm learning, I'm practicing my writing. I'm doing research for that article, so I'm obtaining knowledge that I didn't know. Let's say, for example, in that article, I found out a stat about X player, which I found very interesting. I didn't know. So when you develop those habits of everyday writing, researching, listening, consuming, reading books about football, then you're just doing things that other journalists aren't necessarily doing, and that will set you apart from the pack. And trust me, in today's era, there's so much social media noise. There are a lot of people on Twitter that you're competing with who aren't even necessarily journalists, but they do have influence. There's a lot of things. And if you don't want to blend in as a generic writer that no one really remembers their name, then you have to put yourself ahead of the pack by doing proper tactical analysis, by reading and researching. And trust me, when I'm watching a game, it'll be completely almost foreign to you the way I do it. And many other journalists that do it. I'm not going to put myself in this kind of elite journalist category, but the best journalists out there, when they watch the game, they're not just watching the goals and the assists. They're not kind of watching in a bar when there's things going around. People are drinking, people are half watching, half talking. When I'm watching a game, I'm watching players without the ball. I'm watching the overhead view. I'm watching the tactical setup of both teams. Whereas this player, when the ball is on this side of the field, every little nuance, because football requires a holistic perspective. There is no one answer to anything. We do our best with the eye tests and stats to come up with not a conclusive idea of what the correct answer is, but the best idea we possibly can to analyze. And that's what it takes if you really want to stand out from the pack. And I'm not anywhere where I want to be yet, but basically that's the level of effort that's going to be taking of me every day to reach my goals and also for your goals too. Because trust me, unless you're a really established writer or a football pundit who's played football before at a professional level, you can't just wake up, go out of bed, roll to the studio or roll to your job and do what you kind of got to do. But for us who are basically just starting from scratch, it requires a lot of diligence. And the best football writers in the world, you can probably think of them off the top of your head, they all stand out because they work that much more while the kind of the average journalist is just going through the motions of their job. I hope this video was helpful for you. Again, next video will be probably in Madrid and behind the scenes a little bit. And this one, I just wanted to share some book stuff with you and also some journalism advice. If you want to reach out to me, you can follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook page, Twitter. They'll be linked in the show notes of this video. If you want to reach out to me, Kian at kiansobani.com. My website is not fully launched yet where you can get more information about my mentorship program. But if you want to learn more and you want to talk to me, you can email me and I will try to guide you through certain steps. I may not answer right away, but I promise I will answer. All right, Kian Sobani signing off.